Algeria and France have committed to enhancing relations between the two nation-states, which would include resuming security cooperation and other relations that soured following the scenarios in North Africa. French Prime Minister Emmanuel Macron supported the Moroccan government's claim to Western Sahara, a territory marred by controversy, etc., etc. However, it's interesting to see that France and Algeria are shaking hands. Online, Dr. Paul Kariuki, Executive Director of the Democracy Development Program at the University of KZN and convener at Africa Policy Circle. Dr. Kariuki, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Shafiq, for having me on the show, and good afternoon to all your listeners.
And hopefully we can cool things down a little bit after the heated scenario surrounding the fiscal policies in government. Boy, oh boy, some politicians were getting excited. But nonetheless, Algeria and France, I find this interesting because Algeria and France traditionally, since the fall of colonialism, have had an extremely toxic relationship. So it's quite interesting to see them shaking hands.
Yes, it is, because there is a lot to be lost here if they don't do what they need to do. Both countries, they have a lot to lose if they don't mend this relationship. Firstly, because of the historical connection they have, as we know that Algeria was colonized by the French for more than almost 100 years, between 1830 to 1962. And there's a lot they share in common apart from the language and the norms of living and all that. But of course, over time, that relationship has become strained as the geopolitical tensions continue to increase, like they're happening all over the world at the moment. And unfortunately, they have had a serious diplomatic row between the two countries, mainly around issues of migration management, border security, and of course, issues to do with terrorism. And so because of the differences of perceptions and persuasions, it forced the country to, the two countries to go in a different direction as far as management of those key issues is concerned. And so the gesture now by President Macron to President Tebboune was to kind of create a way they can be able to, recreate their relationship, explore opportunities, how they can, mend the challenges that they are really facing. But then more importantly, as we know, France is losing its grip on the continent, as we've been seeing what's happening northwest of Africa. It's pursuing any relationship that will make them still be relevant on the continent. And I think that is the approach, the diplomatic approach that President Macron has persuaded these Algerian counterparts to reconsider their situations that kind of de-escalate the tensions that have been building up. So hopefully there'll be genuine conversation that will lead to mending the relationship and, create opportunities for both countries to mutually gain economically and politically.
Of course, it is interesting to note that the North African countries have got like a foot in the Mediterranean, as it were, as opposed to countries like South Africa, Namibia, Mozambique, for example, where we look either over the Atlantic or the Indian Ocean. So a slightly different continental focus, isn't it?
I agree. And that's why I'm saying I started my intro by saying there's a lot more to lose if this relationship doesn't work for both countries. Where the world is right now, no country can be able to afford to stay on its own and do life on its own because of the integrated nature of the world at the moment and how other things, other challenges that each country is facing cannot be solved without the others. And while some countries can project an image to say that they can do without others and, kind of trying to police the world and all that, there is very little that any country can do on its own. So at some stage, countries will need to strengthen their inter-country relationships, whether it's at bilateral level or at multilateral level, because what countries stand to lose, especially post-COVID-19 scenario, it's more. And so I think these two countries are showing that diplomatic rows can always be solved if we find mutual intersections where there is a beneficiation that really meets the needs of each country. Secondly, there is opportunities to resolve dialogues, to resolve any issues that can jeopardize the future of the countries and her peoples just because of egos. And I think what these two presidents have shown is that they can lay down any political interests that may jeopardize the greater good being here, the welfare of their two country citizens. And thirdly, they are recognizing that there is more to do with each other than if they do independently. France needs Algeria for all kinds of reasons. It needs to have her foothold on the continent, being that she has faced quite a severe backlash from the Northwest African countries. So is Algeria. Her economy is growing. There's a lot of good things that are coming out of the economy there that needs to be shared to France and all the rest of the world. But how do they do this? First and foremost, start with a dialogue. What can we do about the things that keep us aside, and what can we do together that we cannot do alone?
And of course, our final point, I think it's a domestic economic question, isn't it? You have correctly pointed out Algeria's economy is also resource-based. Algeria, we do know, has lots of oil in the massive desert that surrounds its coastline. And of course, domestic question that a lot of Algerians are French passport holders. So it's, in a sense, they have to live with each other in terms of diaspora economics and politics.
Exactly. They have to do that, and that's a very powerful point even to conclude our conversation about, because it hinges around migration. Now, migration is a global phenomenon. As long as people are alive, they will be moving from one place to the next. But how we do management of this global phenomenon is what really makes countries either win or lose their economic place in the world. So I think it's important that the two countries streamline their migration management policies to ensure that there is they are supportive of the economic and political interests that both share, but more importantly, contribute to better world by indicating that people movement is not a curse. It's a blessing for nations, but it's how it's managed in a way that actually the benefit that accrues with migration and people movement really improves both countries that are involved, or if it's a multiple of them that are concerned. And I think for me, that's where things should be focused on, because there is more to win when people move and be part of each other's nation than the opposite.
100%. And on that note, we leave off this week's edition of African Mirror. Same time next week on a Thursday on Newsbeat. Our special guest, Dr. Paul Kariuki, Executive Director of the Democracy Development Program at the University of KZN and convener at the Africa Policy Circle. As always, Dr. Paul Kariuki, an absolute honor.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.